Imagine this. You run into the guy who made your school days miserable. The one guy who humiliated you, mocked you, and made you dread waking up in the morning. But now, years later, he walks up to you with a calm smile. Not necessarily arrogant, not defensive, just different. At that moment, you realize something unsettling. He didn't just grow up, he survived something. That's probably a reunion between Bakugo and Deku in a hypothetical world. Because for all the explosive anger and ego, Bakugo wasn't just a simple bully. He was a kid shaped by insecurity, pressure, and a robbed idea of what strength was supposed to look like. And here is the part most people miss. The anger that made him unbearable is the same thing that keeps a lot of people stuck long after school ends. To understand Bakugo's growth, we need to look at what actually broke inside him. And while facing that moment is often the difference between becoming bitter or becoming better. In the beginning of the series, it is pretty easy to just not like the character of Bakugo. He basically betrays the Disney Channel bully role, mean, ganging up on people he can easily look down upon, and being hurtful to them. Bakugo was an absolute fucking pain in the ass. He would constantly make fun of Deku, harass him verbally and physically whenever he mentioned wanting to become a hero. He took offense, kind of, because being a hero to him was such an honorable task that only the top of society should be able to strive for that. For Bakugo, heroism is being the strongest, the best, and only that. Not saving people, not being helpful, hopeful, or any positive ageful, just looking cool while doing hero shit and receiving all the status for it. Basically like it was for Endeavor. He simply wanted to be the strongest hero, for status and the money that comes with that. It was pretty obvious that he didn't really care about saving people per se, or being a good person. But it is also important to distinct that he wasn't a bad person at his core either. His erratic behavior stemmed from something more complex than just being a bad guy. In his childhood, he already experienced a huge amount of praise because of who he was. We all had that kid on the playground or in kindergarten, the one who was just popular because he was naturally good at anything he would do. Bakugo was exactly that times 10, because this got further amplified when he received his quirk, which is the thing in hero society. Your quirk pretty much can decade where you will end up in life. It's that impactful. When we look at his childhood, we see that he was born with everything someone in his shoes could wish for. He is gifted, his quirk is insane, with basically no drawbacks. People admire him because of his character, and he's naturally athletic. He fits the hero role pretty well, almost too well. So well in fact that only few can challenge him, and he got very used to that feeling. Being on top became something that felt so good and so familiar to him that whenever the only thing that challenged him, which was pretty much Deku, became not even a rival, part of him saw Deku as a threat, as a reminder that he isn't untouchable. For instance, when Deku was offering him to help after falling into a river, he got upset because someone quirkless, which the society looks down upon so heavily, offered him help. That made him weak in his head, in this warped perception of strength. Or when Deku helped him, or rather attempted to, when he was being attacked by a villain. Those scenarios triggered a deep insecurity in him that he learned in his early childhood. In his mind, he had to be like All Might. He had to become someone who could take anyone. Only that could give him a sense of worth. But Deku alone didn't challenge him enough. It needed more to finally break him. What kind of environment is most likely to break a person? Not one where they are hated, but one where they are no longer special. Bakugo's entrance into the UA High School, a prestigious high school for aspiring heroes, was the first time in his life where admiration wasn't guaranteed. Surrounded by people just as talented, just as driven, just as gifted, his usual identity stopped working. And you can see it almost immediately. The traits that once read as confidence suddenly looked like insecurity. The intensity that made him impressive now made him irritating. For the first time, people didn't fear him, they pointed at him. Even Deku notices it. Bakugo isn't the one looking down anymore. He's the one being isolated. And what happens next is important. Bakugo doesn't become quieter, he becomes louder, more reactive, more demanding, like a little annoying prick who realizes that attention is no longer automatic and panics. Because when your entire sense of worth depends on being on top, standing on equal grounds feels like failing. The first hero exercise was no exception to that. Bakugo was outsmarted by Deku during their fight and ultimately lost because he was trying to do everything on his own. The reaction to it, the first time we see him cry in the show, and definitely not the last one. Since then, he watched Deku closely, and it became apparent that his growth was stunned. And Deku, who grew to be his main rival, became strong at a rapid pace. His ultimate failure is what finally broke him fully apart, getting abducted by villains. He remained the mean attitude, being the loudmouth, the "you won't get to me" type of guy, but a crucial confrontation between him and Deku revealed his true self. He managed to find out that Deku got his quirk from All Might, his role model. So at that moment, Bakugo dealt with multiple existential problems. Why is my rival, who had no quirk, not only chosen by the #1 hero but also surpassing me? Why was I not strong enough to defend myself against those villains? And why am I therefore at fault for All Might having to retire? What's actually happening here is easy to miss if you don't pause for a moment, like for real. Bakugo isn't angry because Deku is strong. He's breaking down because the story he told himself since childhood is collapsing in real time. He cries out in front of the person he once looked down on, not because he lost a fight, but because winning doesn't mean what it used to anymore. Even after physically overpowering Deku in the visually stunning fight, I have to say, even after proving himself in the only way he knows how, it doesn't work. The praise feels hollow and the victory feels empty. And for the first time, Bakugo was forced to sit with a terrifying realization. Being the best, quote unquote, was never enough to tell him who he actually is. He couldn't just stimulate himself with shallow praise of meaningless short-term gratification anymore. The kind of praise that used to keep him going stopped working. Bakugo's fate isn't rare. In fact, chances are you lived some version of it yourself. Growing up, most of us carry a quiet story about who we were supposed to become. Maybe it is being talented, respected, admired for something that finally makes us feel enough. And for a while, that story actually works, until life introduces friction. You fail a subject you thought you were naturally good at, someone you like rejects you, and not gently either, and suddenly something you believed about yourself starts to crack. When that happens, there are two paths. You either sit down with the loss, or you start looking for someone to blame. And that's where bitterness is born. Not from failure itself, but from an identity that couldn't survive being challenged. Most of us don't drift when we change. Change is inevitable, it happens whether we want it or not. Where things usually go wrong is here. We can no longer look at ourselves without turning hostile. Just for a second, think about how common that is. People casually talk about how disgusting they feel, how undesirable they are, how nobody could never ever want them. And not just as a joke, but as a quiet, constant belief. And most of the time, that bitterness didn't come out of nowhere. Some people never had an environment that allowed them to grow. Others never had the support when it mattered. And some of us simply grew up repeating patterns we never learned how to question. Hating yourself or hating the world around you feels like an easy explanation. But if you look closely at where both paths lead, the cost becomes impossible to ignore. Bakugo stood at that exact crossroads. He could have doubled down, become louder, harsher, more hostile, the kind of person who mistakes bitterness for clarity. You can almost hear the answers forming in his head. Why was my rival chosen instead of me? Because the world is unfair. Why wasn't I strong enough to stop the villains? Because I was never taught properly. Why did All Might have to retire because of me? Because the system failed. Not me. Those answers would have been easy, comforting even, but Bakugo didn't take them. Instead, he did something far more difficult. He accepted his place in what happened, not with pride, but with responsibility. And that's where his real growth begins. Not becoming nicer, not in becoming calmer, but in learning that being a hero was never just about being the strongest person in the room. And honestly, I can't even blame anyone for choosing either path. Bakugo's choice was noble, yes, but the other one is understandable in a tragic way. Bitterness is easy to live with when it's shared. It gets normalized, expected even. I know that path pretty well. I cope with weed, with distraction, with telling myself that trying less was just being realistic. I wasn't chasing growth, I was avoiding the part of me that still wanted more. What felt like a few comfortable years turned into something much darker than I expected. Climbing out of that wasn't heroic, it wasn't impressive, It just started with facing myself honestly, without armor. I'm most definitely not where I want to be at yet, but I like the direction I'm moving in now. And for me, that made all the difference, really. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you like this anime character analysis breakdown with a little slice of life from real life at the end, then this is the channel for you. If you liked the video, then, you know, give it a like. Comment down below if you see yourself in Bakugo, because I think, and I don't think I'm just speaking for myself, his character growth is actually insane. And rereading My Hero Academia was such a fun experience because I realized how good this show really is. So if you agree with particularly that point, and with Bakugo being a great guy and all that, then comment it down below. Comment your own ideas really, and other recommendations for my upcoming videos. I'm open to anything really, and I hope to see you on my Skool, on my next video, in the comment section, wherever. Just be safe, man. See ya.